What's up, my fellow vibers? Do you want to develop an app? Well, there's really two fundamental approaches that you can take. My preferred method, my usual method, is that I start from scratch and I use tools like Claude Code and Codex CLI to build the thing from the very beginning. In fact, my channel is mostly dedicated to all of that. But the second approach is honestly a lot simpler and can get you to your first win a lot more quickly. And that approach is using tools like Lovable, like Replit, like Rork to rapidly build yourself a functioning prototype or MVP. Now, the cool thing with those tools is that you can export the code out and start using them inside of real coding tools. And so for this video, we're gonna go from option 2. How can we very quickly build a prototype for something that we think is cool, and then take that code, put it into an actual coding environment and build on top of it. Now, full disclosure, some of these companies have reached out to me to do sponsored videos, but I have this principle on my channel, which maybe is misguided or stupid or might change in the future, that I don't do sponsored videos. And I have that principle because I don't want to have to filter what I say to you guys through this lens of, hey, this company's paying me to say this stuff. I want it to be based on real, genuine experiences. Now, the reason I'm telling you that is that I actually find this workflow valuable and I actually use it from time to time, which is why I want to show it to you. Now, whether you're a beginner that's just starting out, but you know that you're eventually going to want to get to that techier level where you can take something from these tools and really build it out into something cool and robust, or even if you're someone that's been around the block before and you've used Claude Code, do not discount the value of a rapid prototype and getting to value very quickly. So here's what we're doing. We're gonna use a vibe coding tool called Rork, and we're gonna use it to build out a MVP for an app using Google's new Nano banana image capabilities. And so I'm gonna go through each step of the process in real time, and I'm going to stop and show you if there's any blockers that I encounter. I'm not gonna hide anything behind the curtains. And so once we get to a point where it's in a basic functional state, I'm gonna show you how you can actually export the code out and get access to it inside of an actual coding environment on your computer. So that being said, let's get into things, shall we? So we're gonna start off with what I call a product manager prompt. And so the big thing, if you wanna be really successful with this type of stuff, is that you need to spend more time than you'd like in the planning phase. Great code comes from a great planning process. And so what we're doing is we're kicking off the first step of that process here. Now, this prompt will be available, by the way, in the description below the video if you want it. So basically what we're doing is we're giving it a little bit of a persona prompt, telling it is a product manager with a SaaS founder mindset that's really obsesses about the problem, because the key to succeeding with this stuff is solving a very specific problem. You want to think of a problem first syntax. What is the specific problem that I am solving? So we go through and we basically break down kind of some philosophy around that, and then we give it the output that we want it to return to us. So we want an executive summary, just giving us a high level of what we're building. And then based on the MVP, which I'm going to show you that we give to it, we want to break that down into features. So we're going from problem that we have into concrete features that will solve that problem. And then we give a little bit of guidance on how to do that. So it needs to think about like the functional requirements, like the user flowing between the different places in the app, but then also non-functional requirements. Like if this is an image processing app, how quickly does the image response need to be gotten by the user for them to consider that's a good experience, right? We need to start thinking about how fast does this thing need to be and things like that, because that will inform the tech choices that you make down the road. We then give it critical questions. So if there's any clear gap in our logic, we want to make sure we get all of that ironed out. And so from there, we want to basically give it our idea for our MVP. And so what I like to provide is, what are we building? So high level elevator pitch. So in this case, what we're going to be building is an interior design app that's driven by AI. Now, the problem that I'm solving here is that I was remodeling my house recently, and I had a lot of frustration around looking at a completely gutted room and deciding, like, what is the vision for this thing? Like, what do I want this to actually look like, and how can I start shopping for those things? So we're building a chat first style of app where the users can upload a image of a room And then they use this Nano Banana capability to actually design the room. So if they want it to look like minimalist and sleek and Scandinavian, they can prompt that in and it will give them inspiration for that image. Target audience is going to be primarily homeowners like me or people that are renting. And then mostly people that will bend more toward like a DIY solution rather than paying, some expensive designers or design services that can cost many thousands of dollars. Now, based on my limited understanding of the pricing for Nano Banana, it's not cheap. So this app probably won't be cheap, but it will have a lot of value. And so point being, I need to build this around the assumption that the person makes a decent amount of money. So all that being said, what is the MVP flow that I'm thinking about? So I don't really want to worry about user registration or any of that for right now. I just want to make sure this thing works and flows the way I want it to. So I'm telling it, I don't want you to build in authentication flows and onboarding flows and all of that. I want them to immediately land into a demo chat interface where they can actually see a demo conversation going back and forth. So there's an immediate I get it. I understand how it works. I can do that. After they've done that, they're prompted to start their own chat. They can upload their first image. Okay, so this is me thinking through what is an MVP interaction with this app. So kind of a stream of thought about how am I envisioning the user uses this thing. So they upload the image and they describe the aesthetic they want to see. Now, if they don't know about that type of stuff, we'll have quick commands that they can choose from. So make it Scandinavian minimalist, make it boho, make it chic, make it a mid-century modern, right? We're just giving them prompts so they can get immediate value out of it. Now, one of the cool things about Nano Banana is that it can identify objects. And so it would be cool if it could identify a piece of furniture if the room isn't empty and then swap it out. So maybe there's a couch there and they're trying to redesign their existing living room and they want to say, what if this couch was green? Or what if the couch was actually a leather couch? It needs to be able to identify it and then swap it. Similarly, they can just remove all the furniture in the room and then start from scratch. And then they can continue this back and forth conversation, thinking through all of the things that they want. And then once they've done all of that, they can trigger the image generation. And so I don't want each message to generate a new image because that's going to be costly. And so I'd like for them to kind of go back and forth and chat with the AI, and maybe the AI gives them recommendations and they say, yes, I want that. No, I don't want that. And then after it has all of that, it builds the plan of what the user wants, and then it generates the image. So that will help with cost savings. So then anything outside of that is outside of the demo scope. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this thing run and then look at the output. And so this thing has started producing our output, and we can look at the type of response that we're getting. So again, thinking through the problem first. The core problem being people know they want it to look nice, but they have no design expertise to be able to actually visualize what this thing could look like. And so maybe they're looking at Pinterest and they're getting ideas for stuff, but they really don't know how to turn that into something tangible. Then again, it's fleshing out our user personas a little bit more. So the primary persona, the main user for the app, and then also secondary persona of someone that will use the app. It thinks a little bit about, is this solution validated? It talks about alternative solutions, right? So these are going to be competitors that we need to make sure that we are aligning, against the features that they have. So Havenly, for example, I've actually used this service before, and it cost me many thousands of dollars across all of the rooms that I had. So just my office alone, I think it was $500 just for the design, not to mention all the furniture that went in it. So then we go through, well, what are some potential success metrics? How do we know this thing is actually working? So obviously we want users converting into users from demos, that they're actually using the app, they're creating their first design, they're sticking to the app. On the technical side, the image generation is not failing all of the time. So that's the first piece we get out. Then we get that executive summary that we asked it for, which is kind of taking this is more stream of thought. And so it's taking that and just codifying it into something that we can keep in mind as our core benchmark. So from there, it's going to go out and it's going to build out all of our primary feature specifications. So the first feature, that demo experience, what does that look like? Well, as a first-time visitor, I want to see the example of how the app works so that I understand the value and how to actually use it. And so then we have for each of these features, what is the acceptance criteria? Meaning well, how should it function then if that's the case? So for example, when I finish viewing the demo, when I reach the end, I see a CTA that tells me to design my own space. So we can scroll down and just see how this process is repeating for all of the main features that we have. So for example, for those quick command buttons that we talked about, what does that look like? Well, if I upload an image, when the AI responds to me, I see 4 to 6 quick commands. And I can say, make it this, make it that, 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 right? And so this process, again, just continues and moves through for all of the features that we have outlined. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this output, and we are going to go into Rork and move to the next step. So all we're going to do is we're inside of Rork. You obviously need to sign up for an account, and then you'll be brought to a screen that looks like this. And when it asks us to describe the mobile app, all we're going to do is paste in that context. So we're going to paste in that entire message that we just got from Claude in this case, and then we're going to hit the send message button, and it's going to start building for us. Now, once that is done processing, it's basically going to get you to the point of having spun up your initial MVP design. So it's going to tell you what its plan is based on what you just sent through. And then it is going to tell you after it's done what features specifically it implemented. And so now if we were to look at this, the only thing I don't like about this so far is that it's not supposed to land them on this screen that says, hey, you have nothing here. It should land them into this design screen. But then we can see, we have with just dummy images, we have a kind of example onboarding flow. Now, the thing that I don't like about this is all the messages are just there, right? And what I really want to happen is that it kind of types it out and it is simulating a chat. And so that is what I would now go and give feedback to the system. So we can scroll down to the bottom and we can just explain in natural language exactly what the fix is that we want made. So I'm just explaining that. I want the demo experience to emulate a conversation, meaning the demo user sends a message, waits a few seconds, shows a typing indicator, and then it just kind of goes back and forth so it looks like a conversation. And also each time a message is sent, I want the screen to make sure it's scrolling down. So I can just send that through, and then it's going to go through, it's going to think about what it's doing, and it is going to make those changes. Now, one thing I will say is that tools like Rork and Replit and Lovable, they get better as the models get better. So Rork, for example, is already using Sonnet 4.5. It has access to GPT-5, and it has access to Grok code. And so if you were using this app back in the day, you had access to models that weren't as good. And so what that meant was some of the outputs that you would get wouldn't always be something you were super happy with. So just to keep in mind that as those models get better, these tools will get better. And that's why I'm starting to pop back into them for certain types of workflows like this. And so now this thing is done. And if we pop over to design, boom, image pops in, little typing indicator, image pops out, user sends in a message, typing indicator, so boom. Again, a lot we can fix with the design of things and all of that, but we can see how it's functionally doing what we want it to do. And then we can click this start designing space, which should open us into our own chat. And there we go. Now, one thing that I notice is when that happens, this goes away, right? So I'm going to go through it. I'm going to tell it that. So now if we were to come through and we were to upload the image, say boho, and say give it a warm boho design with a couch, we see that it sends the image, right? So it's that user interface is working, but it's not actually doing anything. And so we're seeing down here that we get this error, API error 500. What this is likely caused by is that it's probably not actually hooked up to any sort of image API. So we're gonna have to look at what's happening. So I'm gonna ask it to fix it, and we will see what happens. So really the error that we're just batting up against now is that it's not able to actually send this image request through. And so based on what it told me earlier up above, it said that it built out this AI integration, but in looking through the actual code files, which I mean, not very intimidating, it's pretty simple setup, I don't see anywhere where it's making that request. And so that is basically what I have told it. I said, hey, it looks like we should have it here, but I'm not seeing it anywhere. So go fix whatever this problem actually is. All right, guys. So like I said, I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. I'm going to tell you when we're running into issues and what I am doing. And so I went back and forth a little bit trying to upload the image. And if you remember earlier, it had this issue with the local storage couldn't handle the file size. And so when it made that change, what happened was the backend code then expected to have it in that format that it just changed it away from. And so I basically told it that and gave it the error message. And so it went through and it fixed it. And so it said it's not storing it in that way anymore, and basically made all the other changes that it needs to make. And so now when I come through here and I upload the space from that image, it goes through and it designs it in a boho design, which honestly, this is pretty cool. This is the actual room. And I mean, it did a pretty good job of giving the user inspiration about what this room could look like. It's obviously not perfect, but this is definitely a start. So now if we were to pop over into my designs, and so what it's doing now, I think the way it built it is that every message it receives, it's automatically storing it. So we can see that over here. So a few things that I want to change. Number one being, I want this to show a preview of the image. And number two, I want the user to choose to trigger the saving. So I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna prompt it to do that. So I'm giving it both of these tasks. I'm saying in my designs, I want that image, kind of preview image showing there. And then in that actual workflow that we're in here, the user needs to be able to trigger if they want this saved. So let's see what it did. I went back in, I kicked off another chat, same room image, and I said, make it warm with a leather couch and a blue rug. And that is what it did. So it's got this nice big blue area rug and a nice leather couch. I might actually design the room this way. And then it gave us this little button for save design. So let's see what happens. Okay, we're getting some sort of error on this one. And so we're running into this persistent error with not being able to save the image into this like async local storage. This is something obviously that if we were in the code ourselves, we would be able to kind of fix this a little bit more permanently and not have this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But we'll see how far we can push Rork to see if it fixes the bug or not. Okay, so the only thing now, the save function is working, but the image preview is still not working. So I'm gonna just prompt a little bit back and forth. I'll show you what the outcome is and exactly what I said, but I'm just trying to get this to work such that it actually populates the image of the design that was made. Okay, so now we're running into a wall where it's a persistent issue with tools like this, and it's something you need to be aware of. Now, what is happening is that the app keeps ping-ponging back and forth between how it wants to actually store the images. So it goes back into if it's gonna store it in base 64 and then swapping back and forth to like using that solution, not using that solution, using that solution, not using that solution. And so if it's not able to properly retain the context of why it made other decisions, it's gonna just keep making that issue. So if I were to click fix all, it's just gonna revert it back to what it did before. So this will work again, but then this is not gonna work, right? So it's like a, you can't have your cake and eat it too type of situation is what we're running into. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually just try to switch the model from Sonnet 4.5 to GPT-5, and I'm gonna explain the situation. So let me do that, and then I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Okay, so that worked. Let me tell you what I did. So I basically had to provide it the real context. I basically had to identify that this is what was happening, that it kept flip-flopping, and then tell it what problem it seems to be running into. Now, in a tool like Claude Code or one of those more advanced tools that I talked about in the beginning of the video, you're not really gonna run into stuff like this, to be honest. At least not nearly as often. There's a lot of other tooling that can help you overcome that. But what I told it is that it keeps breaking one feature to fix another. And then based on me reading the errors, I said the fundamental issue is that the set item thing that you keep doing when you call save design breaks the chat, but fixes the image preview. And so you need to find a solution that does not break the file size limits of the async storage, but also allows the image to render properly in my designs, right? And so it went through and it came up with a solution for that. And then I went through and I tested it, and it does in fact work. So what I'm gonna do from here, this delete button doesn't actually work, so I'm gonna tell it to fix that. The save design button doesn't give any sort of like user feedback, like it should indicate a positive state of something happening. So I'm gonna tell it to fix both of those things. And then from there, we'll see if there's any other of these advanced features that we want to start integrating into this MVP and see what can Rork actually handle before we need to actually export it out. All right, guys, so we made this change, and now when we click Save Design, it shows Save Design and then it fades away. Now we're still running into this issue that's cropped back up where again, it's going back and forth with like the storage quota. And so that's something that we're gonna need to kind of address for good once we pop back out into the actual coding environment so we can fix that. But let's pop back up now and look at what our initial features were. So we have the demo experience, so we consider that one MVP is in place. We have the chat interface with the room upload. We have this backend that creates the design. Now this is something that we're gonna have to rebuild once we are kind of out in the wild coding this ourselves, because it seems to all be abstracted away behind a layer that Rork maintains. And so unless we can get access to that, it's not gonna do us any good. So we would have to rebuild that ability to message the Gemini Flash. We have our preset aesthetic styles. Again, this is something where once we eject this thing out, we're gonna wanna do some prompt engineering to maybe talk about what these presets actually mean in practice so that we're not overly reliant on just what the model decides is those things. Now, conversational refinement, we haven't tested this yet, so we can go in and start testing that here in a second to see, like, can we come in here and say, for example, if we were to tell it to make the couch green, I don't even know if this functionality works. It looks like it's not accepting any new messages outside of that. So we would need to go through and fix that. So the conversational piece needs to be handled still. Furniture swapping, I know this is going to be technical. And so we probably can't do this inside of Rork specifically, but we'll at least give it a try. We have the manual button already to create the space and save the design. It's storing in the My Designs area. And so as far as all of like the MVP features, it went through and it built almost all of them except for 2. So we can go in and just refine those last few pieces. And then I will show you how we can eject this out and start building a plan for, now that this proof of concept is in place, how can we really start leveling it up and making it seem very professional? All right, guys. So we went through and we refined this conversational component. And so upload the room. We tell it we want a warm sunroom, couch, blue rug with end tables. With the boho option was selected and it gives it to us. And now we can pass in a refinement. So in this example, we said add more plants. And it definitely did that. Add this plant over here, added one up on the wall over here. So that seemed to work. And then I went through and said, make the sofa leather because it was this white. And now it's swapped to a leather couch. So we could save the design, fades away nicely, pop into My Designs, and boom, we can see it right there. So at this point, if we wanted to get it onto our actual computer, what would we do? Because again, we have this nice little MVP. It's kind of doing some of what we want to do. Again, it's not the be all end all of this app, obviously. But now we want to get it into an environment where we can start developing with it for real. And where you choose to make this decision is up to you based on how slow you're finding it inside of Rork and how comfortable you are inside of an actual coding environment. So what you want to do is you want to come up here into integrations, and there's going to be this option for GitHub. So you want to click this button for create repository, and what that's going to do is it's going to sync the code over to GitHub. Now they do have this option for creating a backend, which admittedly I haven't messed around with this much since it's been in here. And so the one thing that I'd be curious about is how much further can we actually push it inside of Rork if we decided to use their backend features. But I know that I can build these backends pretty easily myself. And so I'm just going to create this repository, and then we get a link to the repo right here. So we can just click on that, and then we can come into code, copy this link, come down into our terminal in our computer and just type git clone, paste in the URL, and it's going to clone that entire project in. And then we just want to navigate into that specific repo. And if we were to list all the files, now we have all of those files from our project in there. So if we were to open up our code editor, we can see everything that we were working with inside of Rork is now on our computer. And I mean, that was pretty fast. So now what if we want to test that this thing is actually working on our computer? So what we can do now is type npm install to make sure all of the packages are installed. And then we can say after that, I want you to start it. So once that boots up, all you have to do if you want to test this on an iOS simulator, for example, you would type I, and it's going to pop open your simulator, and it is going to download everything for you. And so once that command finishes running through, we can see that it is on our local computer. Now, some of the spacing is messed up because we don't have the safe views and all of that. At the end of the day, we were developing it in a browser, but now we have our app on our computer. So now that this thing is running, we have all of the same functionality that we had built out inside of Rork accessible on our local computer. With the exception of the images and stuff, we would need to go into our project and probably add the images back in, but pretty good spot from here. So what do we do from here? So this first product manager that we use to kick off this process, this entire prompt, it comes from a set of prompts that I use anytime I'm doing this type of development. And you can get access to all of these in the group in the description below the video. So this first agent really defined what our project was even going to be. And again, this output is what we used to kick off this process to begin with. So this output is exactly the output we would get from here. But what do we do from here next? Like if you were happy with this proof of concept, but you're like, hey, I mean, it's not looking like exactly what I would want it to look like. This doesn't look super, super professional. I want to really take it up a notch and build this thing out and do something with it. Like, what do I do from here? You want to implement this type of system or framework. So the first thing that I would personally want to do is start refining in some of the generalized UX and UI principles. So the thing is, when we went to kick this off, there's not really a codified user experience. Like we didn't think a lot about like, how do I want the user to feel when they're using this app? And how does that come through in the design choices that get made? And so we have a prompt that helps you do that. After we have that dialed in, we can move in and we can architect this system as a whole. So for example, imagine this thing blows up overnight. You launch it on Twitter or Reddit or Product Hunt and it just blows up. And now you have 1,000 users trying to upload images at the same time. That would crash your app if you do not have the proper system architecture in place. And so this prompt helps us define what that's going to be. After we have those three things, we can start using this back-end agent and front-end agent to really start building out all of those features that we have in our minds. Now, if you want to see examples of the types of output you can get from this UX UI exercise, I will link a video somewhere around here where I've done this type of exercise to show what type of apps we can get out the other side. And so the general process, if you wanted to go more like the prompting route for something like this, is that you would copy this prompt, go into your coding environment. In this case, I'm going to use Claude Code because that's what I prefer. So we could come in here, we could turn it on. And again, this would work inside of a cursor chat, maybe not as well as something that's a powerful agent that you pay $100 a month for, but it would still work. And then what you would do is, number one, we need to actually have the output that we're going to pass in here. So you could go all the way back to this, okay? Copy this entire thing, go back into your code editor, paste it in, copy this UX prompt, back to your code editor, paste it in. And the only thing that I would add on here, since this is based on like agent definitions for full projects, is just reference the file that it should use. Use this file as your input context. And so from there, what it's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to build you a full, robust UX UI system that you can use to really start leveling up what this project looks like and how it feels. And we can see here it has the entire design system being laid out. It's going to go piece by piece and build out really everything for every major feature that we have. So this is where I would personally take this next if it were me, is that we were relying on Rork's backend to actually edit the image. So I'm going to need to really hook in Gemini now, which I will just use an MCP server to pull the documentation and pass it through so it can start generating images. And then once I've done that, we need to understand how to segment images so that we can say like, hey, this is a couch. I want you to swap out that couch specifically. I want it placed in this area. A lot of those other advanced functionalities that will differentiate it from someone just using Gemini by themselves to do this thing, we're going to have to build those types of features in. So that would be the next steps in this project, is building out the actual back end. So that's it, guys. Pretty fast path to a functional MVP. Now from here, again, where would we take this app and the code that we have? I would keep dialing in this MVP because, again, it's important that it's differentiated from what people could just do with a model. I want the app to get better over time as the image models get better, and not just make it a thing that, hey, people could technically just go do this themselves. So there's a lot of features that I have in the backlog that are going to help enable that differentiation. So specifically, we're going to build a lot more detail into the backend services adding that functionality in through the front end, and then kick off some of our other back-end agents that I was showing you to make sure this thing's gonna be production ready and we can put it in a real user's hands. So if you wanna see videos about that type of process where you can go from even completely blank inside of a tool like VS Code or Cursor fully through to complete projects, I'll link a playlist on this channel where we do that type of stuff. And as always, make sure to subscribe so that you don't chance that YouTube decides to never show you my content again. But that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.